Good morning, everyone. So, today we are going to talk about something interesting which has been ongoing for a long time. So, this refers to the DPDP Act and where it exactly merges with training of the AI models. So, the DPDP, so we don't have a DPDP Act, we have DPDP rules which were enacted sometime uh, around 2025, and then we have the information technology rules which were enacted sometime around 2011. Until then we have the information technology act, which has been overseeing all of this ever since 2000. And the DPDP Act that we are relying upon was something that was enacted back in 2023, but however, several provisions of the Act were not even brought into force up until now. So we only have the rules that are effective, and we don't have a proper legislation that can guide us regarding uh, uh, how these kind of policies or provisions can be implemented with the advancement of technology. So now, coming to the advancement in technology. So as you know, AI is moving at a very fast pace. So as a result of which, many of these so one thing you must understand at the beginning is that many of the users of technology are referred to as data principals, and many of these companies that are basically processing the data or analyzing the data, so developing or processing and deployment of data is basically done by the data fiduciaries. So all of these companies that are using generative AI tools are mainly referred to as data fiduciaries. So now these data fiduciaries have a huge responsibility to maintain safeguards at all points in time, because while they are using information for training or data sets for training their AI models, what typically happens is that a lot of this information consists of or is referred to as personally identified information. So, personally identified information, or what is commonly referred to as PII. So, this information may include a lot of sensitive information which has been fed by the user. So it could be in the form of images, it could be in the form of text, it could be in the form of videos, or anything which the AI model uses or the algorithm uses for training that particular model and generating outputs. Now, these companies may claim that they are not going to misuse this particular huge amount of information that they gather, and that they are falling within the provisions or policies of the MeitY, and that they are not that they are complying with the provisions and they are not violating any of the rules. But unfortunately, time and again we see that many of such policies are violated, and that is why it has become very important to set certain audit regimes in place by the government itself, or certain safety certain safety mechanisms or certain regulatory mechanisms to basically control or regulate the way the information is being processed by these data fiduciaries. So these kind of AI models that basically use this information, what they do is, while processing the information, although they say that there is the explicit consent of the user that is taken before processing the model, and in most cases it is done, what follows in the privacy policy is something which is very cleverly drafted, and many of us may not understand that entirely. And also, there is a second thing which is very important when it comes to data processing, that is data minimization. That is usage of data for very specific purposes. Now, according to the DPDP Act itself, uh, the DPDP Act, which was, I'm referring to the 2023 legislation, so which wasn't brought to effect. So as per that legislation itself, what was said is that data can be used only for certain strict purposes such as research, training, etc. However, today it has crossed those limits and it has been used for purposes beyond that. So, and lastly, what is most concerning is that data which has been used to train these AI models cannot be erased. So, when we talk about anonymization of data or pseudonymization of data, complete erasure of data has become extremely difficult or almost close to impossible or very expensive. So this is not like any other training system which uses data and once you delete the files, it's completely removed from the system. No, that is not true. This retains some amount of data and those traces of data may stay in the system and could be even misused later. So what these companies claim is that they would not use that data later, but we can never trust any source. So this is something which is quite alarming. That is why we immediately need a regulation in place. So now there are certain data fiduciaries and then there are significant data fiduciaries, and it becomes very important to understand their roles because they are chiefly responsible in deploying the AI systems on the ground and regulating them. So they agree to such kind of policies which are set by the MeitY, where they agree to explicit consent, they agree to data minimization, they agree to data sanitization, they agree to anonymization, etc. and several other policies which are drafted by the government. Despite all of that, there is still a large amount of your personal data which you post on your Instagram or your Facebook and several other social media platforms, which is available to them in chunks or in huge amounts, which they expose their AI models to for training purposes, and that remains, or that is a growing concern these days. Now, since erasure of such data is such a big problem, people are very cautious before even uploading such information online. Although most of these platforms are promising that they won't misuse the data, many of the data principals are not very satisfied with the assurance that has been given to them. And that is why they are seeking for these kind of regular audits and safeguards, which need to be provided by the any kind of a government body as an assurance that we will take care of your data, you don't need to worry about it. So therefore, even Europe has a GDPR policy which is very watertight, and it gives that assurance to its citizens that their data will not be misused under any circumstance. Now that assurance has to be given to the public. Since that is not there, we need such a regulation in place. So I hope that concept is very clear. So except in cases of medical emergencies or public health issues or national emergencies or research purposes, these were the main exemptions which were allotted to these kind of companies while using personal data. However, it has crossed limits to using personal data for other purposes also. That is why in today's world, we see these kind of cloning voices, using images and creation of deep fakes, violation of personality rights, violation of public rights, and so on and so forth. So therefore, there is somewhere undermining of that transparency that is happening. Now, what they have promised is that the black box effect which is constantly associated with the AI policies, is said to is very opaque, first of all. So no one understands how the data is being processed. However, there are certain companies that claim to be doing research in this particular area to unravel this whole process and try and break it open and understand how this works. But what is even more concerning is that no one understands this much. Not even the makers of this particular AI model or the ones who are training this model, the data fiduciaries, also don't understand how the black box effect works and how the AI models process the data and how the final output is achieved. So now there is another issue that if a particular data principal wants to withdraw consent, doesn't want his data to be uploaded, or doesn't want his data to be used for a particular purpose, withdrawal of consent, once it has been given, also seems to be impossible to a certain extent. Now, this also seems to be quite concerning. So, I am sort of raising areas where the red flags are there. So, I am just raising the red flags and I am just sort of showcasing the alarms which are associated with this kind of a area or a space where the DPDP Act is merging with artificial intelligence, so that we are well aware tomorrow that we are posting information on websites which have been used, where that information has been used to train AI models. And even in case of machine learning, they work on algorithms which are extremely complex and difficult to understand and haven't been entirely unraveled yet. And we are just blindly giving all our data into the hands of such systems without even safety protocols and audits in place. And it's a huge risk that we are undertaking with our personal data. So therefore, this should be brought to this has already been brought to the this has already been brought to the notice of the government. It just needs to be highlighted further, and we need to immediately come up with with a legislation to strengthen the policies and regulatory frameworks which can ensure that the content is not being misused. So this is the underlying fact that I want to completely sort of emphasize upon, so that we know what role a data principal plays, what role a fiduciary plays, who gives the consent, who gives the data, who uses the data, who processes the data, who deploys the AI system. What do you mean by explicit consent? What do you mean by withdrawal of consent? What is meant by erasure requirement? What is meant by data minimization? What is meant by pseudonymization? That is, for example, the data where you cannot trace back the data to the person. But actually, in such cases, we are somewhere able to trace back the information to the individual, because it's taking your facial features, it is recognizing your fingerprint, it is taking your biometric details. So it is easily able to trace back the details that you provide to the person who has provided those details. So therefore we need to be, so all this is very sensitive information that we are dealing with, and therefore one needs to be very careful. So that is a huge red flag that I want to showcase on this platform. And with generative AI coming in, and such kind of deep fake crises that we are facing, and with violation of so many rights which are faced by common people, it is extremely important to take to take these kind of or to bring regulatory protocols in place and sort of correct the system that is presently existing. So with the DPDP Act coming into force, which it will probably by 2027, I think we'll have a strengthened system a stronger system to regulate and sort of restrict the amount of data which can be used by AI training models, and consent will be made stronger, and data erasure will be made better. Black box theory, which is so opaque, will be finally understood by breaking it down, by unlearning the process, and we will have more information on hand about AI. Right now, we just have startups which are still trying to understand and decode what these models are actually made up of. So maybe we'll have more information on hand by then. And I hope to see people develop more trust in the system and build a brighter future ahead. So if you have further inputs regarding this, feel free to reach out or put your views in the comments. Thank you.